Would you give your fiancé to your sister? It sounds absurd, right? A ridiculous, impossible scenario. And yet, 15 years after I cut ties with my family, they showed up at my doorstep with a request so outrageous, so utterly deranged, that for a moment I thought I had misheard them. Give John to your sister. That was what they said. No shame. No hesitation.
My parents, who had chosen my sister over me my entire life, now stood before me, expecting me to hand over the man I had built a life with, as if he were some disposable item they could simply reassign. I had spent years healing, creating a loving home, raising my children. I thought I had finally escaped their twisted sense of entitlement. But the past has a way of creeping back when you least expect it. And this time, I was ready. My name is Mary. At the start of last year, I overindulged in gourmet food and gained 3 kilos. So here I am, 45 years old, dieting in anticipation of the upcoming end-of-year holiday season. My logic? If I lose 3 kilos now, I won't have to worry when I inevitably gain them back during the long holiday. Makes sense, right? Right. But let's be real. Between Christmas and New Year's, there's so much delicious food, it's practically a happy dilemma. And knowing myself, I'll probably end up buying Valentine's chocolates for myself, too. Oops. I think I'm already drooling a little. Well, since I'm on the topic of winter, I have a story from when I was 25 that I'd really like you to hear. At the time, I had been dating my boyfriend, John, for several years. Our relationship was steady, and when we finally got engaged, it felt natural, like the next chapter of our lives was falling into place. The moment had come to introduce him to my parents. It was supposed to be a simple, formal greeting, the kind of meeting where my parents would nod approvingly, the marriage discussion would go smoothly, and we'd all toast to a promising future. But then my older sister, Susan, walked in. She had just come home from work, and from the moment she laid eyes on John, something shifted. I could feel it. It was a strange, undeniable sensation, because when you grow up with a sibling, you learn to read their every expression, every little movement. And Susan? She had fallen in love with my fiancé at first sight. I told myself it was just a passing infatuation, a fleeting moment of admiration. But as the evening wore on, I couldn't ignore the signs. When Susan shook John's hand, she held on a second too long, her cheeks tinged pink. Every time he spoke, she gazed at him with a dreamy, almost dazed expression. It was awkward, inappropriate even. But I convinced myself it was harmless. After all, emotions can be unpredictable, and Susan had to know the boundaries. She was my sister. She wouldn't actually do anything, right? I chose to pretend I hadn't seen anything. But that illusion shattered later that night. I had just gotten comfortable in my room when Susan, fresh out of the bath and wrapped only in a towel, confronted me. "You should call off the engagement," she declared. I blinked, stunned. "What?" She crossed her arms, her expression serious. "That man is a philanderer. You can do better." It was so sudden, so absurd, that for a moment I wondered if I had misheard her. "And why exactly do you think John is a playboy?" She lifted her chin. "A woman's intuition?" I stared at her. My sister, who had never had a boyfriend in her entire life, was telling me to trust her intuition about men. It was laughable. Of course, I dismissed her warning with a casual, yeah, I'll be careful, and thought nothing more of it. But Susan wasn't done. John began visiting my family home more often, eager to build a good relationship with my parents. They were thrilled, and I was happy that things were falling into place. At least, that's how it should have been. Because while John was focused on bonding with my parents, Susan was focused on something else entirely. According to John, when I wasn't around, she would grab his arm, press herself far too close to him, and ask in a sultry voice, "Don't you think Marianne is a little immature?" She asked for his contact information, pouted when he hesitated, and at one point, intentionally fell skirt flipping up, underwear on full display. John, to his credit, was more amused than anything. "It was so over the top," he told me, shaking his head. Honestly, I wasn't sure whether to be horrified or entertained.
But what worried me wasn't just the theatrics, it was the fact that Susan genuinely thought she had a chance. She had convinced herself that John couldn't reject her outright because she was family. Every time they crossed paths, she turned on the charm. "Hey!" she would coo in a voice so sugary sweet it could give cavities. What started as an infatuation had evolved into full-fledged obsession. And to make matters worse, it wasn't just about attraction anymore. John worked at a prestigious company, a fairly large one, as Susan put it. The stability, the financial security, his dependable nature, it all struck a chord with her. One night, she sighed wistfully and admitted, "He's responsible, has the exact type of face I like, and can provide a comfortable future. He's just a good man." I could only stare at her, wondering how on earth I had ended up in a love triangle I never signed up for with my own sister. While witnessing my sister's inappropriate behavior, my parents said nothing. In fact, it's not new for my parents to say nothing to my sister. Honestly, my sister has always been the type who can't do anything right. For instance, if asked to warm up the side dishes, she somehow uses a non-heat-resistant plastic dish and melts it. And she was bad at studying. She was also not good at sports, often skipping swimming classes with various excuses like hurting her foot, feeling unwell, or having skin issues. She was not good at academics, sports, or household chores. Honestly, her looks aren't particularly outstanding either. Still, just because she is the eldest daughter, my parents treat her specially and secretly push the role of supporting her onto me quietly. That is, I've been continually told to make her stand out without attracting attention. It's unfair to be treated so differently as siblings. However, maybe my parents see her as a pitiable child who can't do anything, which makes them feel even more sorry for her. Strangely, I've always been the type who is efficient and can do anything quickly. Perhaps the adults felt there was no charm in teaching someone who could handle everything on her own. Thus, I can easily manage the task of supporting my sister, and I sometimes intentionally act as the incapable one in public. As I grew out of my teenage years and realized continuing this way, I'll fail the exams, I began to resist my parents and act on my own will. If I had continued to comply, I really would have become a person who can't do anything. Due to my defiance, my sister began to dislike me a bit for losing support, but our relationship was never truly bad. We could talk normally, and sometimes I even gave advice on her issues. Our family had distorted aspects like overprotectiveness towards my sister and a bit of hostility from her, but I still think we were a perfectly normal family. However, the balance was disrupted because John did not reciprocate my sister's feelings. "I can't accept that my younger sister is getting married before me." On the eve of our wedding, my sister exclaimed these words to our parents. "Don't say that, Susan. You will find a good partner soon, too." I agree with Dad. It's not like that. Normally, the older sister gets married first, and then the younger sister. It's too soon for her, but the wedding is tomorrow, isn't it? What are you saying? Mom, don't you care about me? I'm going to be the pitiful older sister who gets surpassed by her younger sister. That's not true. That night, I quietly listened to the intense exchanges between my sister and our parents from the hallway. Should my sister get married first? If I waited for her to marry, I would age considerably in the blink of an eye. What is she really thinking? I thought once she voiced her complaints, she would settle down. I understand. Both Mom and Dad will not attend the wedding tomorrow, so please be satisfied with that, Susan. What? I was shocked by these words. Both my father and mother agreed not to attend my wedding and apologized to my sister. What is this? It's like they're followers of my sister's cult. This is beyond mere indulgence. Still, my sister sighed unhappily. Fine, I'll compromise. Let her have a wedding that nobody acknowledges. She clearly does not want me to marry John, probably because she herself has feelings for him. It's unbelievable. A wedding without the presence of my parents due to my sister's unrequited love is becoming a reality. The wedding day arrived. Despite it being a day of celebration, I could hardly sleep due to anxiety. Of course, it wasn't anticipation that kept me awake, but the discomfort from recalling the exchanges between my sister and my parents. I won't forget the satisfied smile on my sister's face when my parents told her they wouldn't attend. At the venue, I explained to John and his parents that mine would not be attending. I apologize. My sister opposes this marriage, so my family will not be attending, I said. It was a heartbreaking announcement to make. My in-laws could hardly believe that there were parents who would not attend their own daughter's wedding. They were silent for a while after hearing my story on such an important day. The moment I felt the heavy atmosphere, my mother-in-law took my hand immediately. My father-in-law placed his hand on top of ours. Do you remember that your family is here? Don't make this day a sad one.
Come on, why don't you smile? Said my mother-in-law warmly, and I couldn't help but tear up.
Marianne, I'm here as your husband, so please stop saying the family isn't attending,
John said as he tenderly stroked my head. Seeing me start to cry, my in-laws and John hurried to cheer me up, saying, Don't cry, you're the bride and your makeup will run, even though they were joking. My mother-in-law looked at me intently, her gaze steady but kind.
Marianne, she said, her voice firm yet gentle. It might be tough with your family back home, but this new life you're starting, it should be a wonderful beginning. Let's build your family now. Though I felt abandoned, lost in the weight of what I had left behind, she pulled me into a tight embrace. A warmth I hadn't expected enveloped me. Then John and my father-in-law followed, their presence solid, reassuring. I took a shaky breath and told myself, it's okay. Just like she said, this is a new beginning. That day, I vowed to build my own happy family. And that day, I officially became John's wife. 15 years have passed since then. In that time, John and I built a life together, a real life. We had 3 beautiful children. Our capable, sharp-witted daughter, who somehow always keeps her 2 mischievous little brothers in check. The house is never quiet, chaos unfolding in the form of shrieks, laughter, and occasionally the sound of something breaking. Sometimes, when I hear myself yelling, "Stop it right now," even I am surprised by how much I've become the mother I once never imagined being. John's career flourished, and we bought a home, a place filled with memories, warmth, and stability. For years, our lives were peaceful, until one day, the past showed up at our doorstep. It happened out of nowhere. Unexpected visitors. My father, my mother, my sister. I hadn't seen them in 15 years. After my marriage, I had kept my distance, cut ties, never even given them my new address. And yet, somehow, they had found me. When I opened the door and saw them standing there, my first instinct wasn't a warm, tearful reunion. It was suspicion. What do you want? No pleasantries. No, long time no see. Just cold, blunt reality. My sister was the first to speak. I have a favor to ask. My parents nodded, their faces carefully composed. It's something only you can do for us, my mother added, her voice carrying a weight that sent a chill down my spine. My stomach tightened. What could they possibly need from me after 15 years of silence? Half expecting, half dreading their answer, I stayed silent. Then my mother finally spoke. We want you to give John to your sister. For a moment, the world stood still. John and I exchanged stunned glances, his expression mirroring my own disbelief. Wait, what? My voice came out sharp, incredulous. What do you mean, give John away? My parents averted their eyes, guilt flickering across their faces. Only Susan stood there smug and unbothered. My father cleared his throat. She's still single. She's turning 42 this year, and that's a problem. I stared at him, struggling to comprehend the logic, or rather, the absolute insanity behind his words. John looked just as baffled. What does that have to do with me? Then came the real explanation. The company she worked for recently went under. She's unemployed. A pause. Then my mother added, she has no prospects, no security. We're worried about her future. I said nothing, but in my head my answer was loud and clear. No. I don't think so. But my father wasn't done. He pressed on, his tone almost pleading. She's always liked John. She never married because of that. And you've already had 15 years with him, haven't you? So please, couldn't you let your sister have him for the rest of her life? I waited for a punchline, for them to laugh, to tell me this was some kind of sick joke. But they didn't. They meant it. They had come to my home after 15 years not to reconnect, not to apologize, not to make amends. They had come to take my husband. What? What do you mean? Seeing their reactions, John seemed lost for words as well. Meanwhile, my parents were pleading, please, and my sister maintained her haughty demeanor. She seemed certain she would get John given that my parents always catered to her desires. It's no wonder she believed it. But this was an outrageous request. As I held my head in my hands, John pulled me aside and whispered, "This might actually be a chance." Really? Yeah, because this is like that joke you made when you were drunk coming to life. Then shall we go for it? With that, we stood up and faced my sister and parents again. Do you really love John that much? Surprised by my question, my sister couldn't hide her astonishment and repeated several times, Yes, I really have loved him all this time. Truly? That's some deep affection to continue loving him for 15 years, even though he's another woman's husband. Yes, it's been very painful seeing you and John together. It should have been me. Stunned by her conviction-filled words, John and I struggled to keep our composure. I give up. If you love him that much, I'll step aside. The parents were shocked by this statement. My mother quickly reacted. Really? Don't you love John too? No, actually, John, to tell you the truth, I've always liked Susan. When John replied, my sister's face flushed with delight. Really? I knew it. You never resisted when I hugged you and your eyes always looked so loving. I've been waiting. Finally. This moment has come. It was hard for me to suppress my laughter. John was pretending to cry, but I could see his shoulders shaking. We'll just have to bear with this moment a little longer. We'll always be together from now on, John. Suddenly, my sister started speaking to him so casually, it strangely sounded natural. For the past 15 years, she must have been experiencing a fulfilling romance with John in her mind. Susan, I'm happy. Please be my support from now on, John said with a smile. Yes, absolutely. So, I'm going to quit my job. Really? The sudden blush on my sister's face disappeared, replaced by an expression of shock. I want to be with you, Susan, all the time, so I'm quitting my job to always be by your side. What? I won't even go outside anymore. I'll follow you to the bathroom, and I'll watch you do housework from behind. John's cheerful tone left my sister momentarily stunned before she began to panic. Our parents couldn't hide their disturbance either. But I'm not working either, and this is troubling. What's troubling? If we're together, we have nothing to fear. We don't need money to be happy. But nowadays, we need to pay for insurance, right? It's not like the old times. We can't love each other if there is no money. I'm not saying that, but... My sister's eyes lost focus. Seizing the moment, I quickly said, John, if we do end up divorcing, I'll be taking a generous share of the assets, so you better pay up. Don't worry, your sister and parents will take care of the payments, John replied with a laugh. Hearing this, our parents went pale and looked at each other. Susan, this is hard to say, but this isn't right. Stealing a husband from your sister. Exactly. Susan, that is indeed. Where had all the previous passion gone? It was as if our parents had suddenly switched their gear. What are you talking about? You promised to give John to me. But Susan, that was before... I don't want to hear it. Doesn't anyone support me? As my sister ranted in a frenzy, she pulled my mother's hair, and my father struggled to mediate it. It was like watching a scene of utter chaos. In the midst of the chaos, John calmly inserted his words as everyone's attention turned to him. He said, Honestly, you are not my type. I respect you as Marianne's sister, but apart from that, I don't really want to interact much with you, especially that upward gaze. Yes, that actually turns me off. The feeling that someone harbors unrequited feelings for me is honestly quite difficult. John's candid remarks left both my sister and our parents speechless. But John, what was all that earlier? Please stop acting so casually with someone else's husband. My voice was firm as I stepped in front of John, blocking my sister's path. There's no way he could ever fall for you. We have a family. We are living happily. Susan froze mid-step, her face pale. Then, suddenly, she snapped. What? You tricked me! She shouted, eyes blazing. I scoffed. Tricked you? How could you possibly believe that someone who hasn't contacted you in 15 years actually loves you? Isn't that a bit unrealistic? Her face turned beet red, her lips quivering. Tears welled up in her eyes, not from sadness but sheer frustration. I took a step closer. If you were truly an attractive woman, maybe. But tell me, Susan, where is the charm in someone who has never held a steady job, still depends on her parents, and can't even manage a household because her mother has always done everything for her? You think any marriage would last under those circumstances? Behind me, John chuckled quietly. For the first time, Susan was confronted with the truth she had spent a lifetime avoiding, and it shattered her. She broke down into loud, uncontrollable sobs, her entire body trembling. My parents hovered beside her, half-heartedly patting her back, their expressions torn between concern and reluctant acknowledgement. They knew I was right. I exhaled, the last remnants of my patience slipping away. I'm not handing John over. So please, Susan, give up. At that, she wailed even louder, like a child denied their favorite toy. It was an unseemly sight for a grown woman. She really hasn't changed at all. I leveled her with one last look. Take this experience as a lesson and don't involve yourself with us again. No matter what kind of trouble you get yourself into in the future, don't expect us to come running. With that, I slowly closed the door, shutting out her cries. Later, as the children gathered around, curious about the commotion, I smiled. It's Halloween season, so it seems a ghost came early. My eldest's eyes sparkled mischievously. Should we exorcise it? Though I stopped that idea before they got too enthusiastic, the eerie wailing outside almost made it seem like they were right. Another 5 years passed. Susan remained single. She managed to find a job briefly, but was fired for inappropriate behavior. She caused trouble in every matchmaking event she attended, rushing into proposals so aggressively that she was eventually banned from them altogether. At this point, it seems highly unlikely she will ever marry. Meanwhile, my parents, who spent years enabling her, are now working part-time, despite their age, trying to scrape together savings for their future. I wonder if they finally understand the consequences of their indulgence after all their hard work. They have no one to rely on. As for me, my days are peaceful. Thanks to my intelligent children and John's stable income, I have the luxury of being a homemaker without worrying about school fees. Sometimes I wonder if working outside would help me burn off the extra holiday calories a little faster, but then again, who needs that kind of stress? My daughter, already slim, is entering her growth phase and insists she wants to start dieting. You can think about that when you're older like me, I tell her, firmly persuading her against it. Meanwhile, my 2 sons have taken up dancing. They recently showcased their talent at a local event, winning several awards. We're going to be in BTS one day, they declare confidently. I sincerely hope BTS continues as a group long enough for my boys to achieve their dreams. Our home is often filled with warmth and laughter, especially during visits from my in-laws, who are as dear to me as my own parents. We share delicious meals, trade stories, and cherish the time spent together. During the children's spring break, we're planning a spa trip, a chance to unwind and enjoy real quality time as a family. Looking back, there were many challenges before marriage, but through all of it, my life with John has been filled with happiness. True family bonds aren't about appearances, status, or obligation. They are built on love, trust, and the moments we share. I only hope that life grants us all continued health and longevity so we can create even more memories together. Was I wrong to shut the door on my family that night? They had crossed a line, and I had finally had enough. My parents, who had always favored Susan, had come to take my husband from me after 15 years of silence. They didn't come to reconnect or apologize, they came to demand John, as though they could just claim him as if he were theirs. Susan, lost in her fantasy, couldn't see how ridiculous it all was. When John played along and pretended he might actually choose her, she finally saw the truth. She wasn't the woman he wanted. She wasn't the woman anyone wanted. No job, no stability, no skills, just a sense of entitlement. And when the reality hit her, it shattered her completely. My parents, for the first time, saw their daughter for what she truly was, someone who had always been given everything without earning it. As I closed the door on them, I knew it was over. There was no turning back. I wasn't going to let their mistakes become my burden. Looking back, I wonder if they finally understand the consequences of their indulgence. They enabled Susan for years, and now they're left with nothing. Meanwhile, John and I have built a beautiful life. 3 kids, a loving home, and in-laws who actually care. I no longer carry the weight of a family that never truly valued me. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is walk away from what's toxic. And that's exactly what I did. What would you have done? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more.
My name is Skylar, and my life changed the day Azriel's hand struck my face. That slap echoed not just in our small living room but deep within me, shattering the illusion of a happy marriage. I stood there, my cheek burning, the shock pinning me in place. Azriel's eyes, once so warm and inviting, now glared at me with a coldness I couldn't comprehend. This wasn't just a mere argument, it was the breaking point. I was always the practical one, saving every penny I could. Coming from a modest background, frugality wasn't just a habit, it was a necessity. Even after landing a decent job, my lifestyle remained unchanged. I saved diligently, investing in mutual funds and stocks. My knowledge in business administration, something I majored in during college, came in handy. I had dreams, simple yet profound, owning a house where my family could live happily. That dream felt closer every day, or so I thought. Azriel and I met at work. He was charming, reasonably handsome, and well-liked, especially by the female staff. Our romance bloomed in the cubicles and meeting rooms of the company where we both worked. It was a swift transition from dating to marriage. No kids yet, though we had been married for 3 years. I yearned for children, but our work schedules and Azriel's apparent disinterest always seemed to get in the way. His lack of enthusiasm puzzled me. We worked in different departments. Mine demanded overtime but paid well, while his was more relaxed with less pay. Azriel would return home early, losing himself in video games until I arrived. The prospect of a child meant an end to his carefree evenings, and he knew it. My dream of a family was slipping away, not because of timing or fate, but because of his choice. The situation at home was no better. We lived near his mother, a decision made when his father's health was failing. But even after his father passed, his mother's presence in our life didn't diminish. She was a constant visitor, her words laced with sarcasm and judgment. "You're late again," she'd comment, barely looking at me. "Is he eating properly?" she'd ask, her concern solely for Azriel. Her criticisms were relentless, and Azriel, ensconced in his virtual world, remained oblivious. That day when Azriel's hand met my face, something within me snapped. The pain was more than physical. It was the realization of a loveless, unappreciative marriage. I couldn't stay any longer in a home where respect was absent and my dreams were ignored. I had prepared for this moment, though I never wished for it to come. As Azriel seethed in anger, I made my choice. I would leave this house and file for divorce. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I deserved better, and I was ready to fight for it. In the quiet of my old bedroom at my parents' house where I found refuge, I lay awake, thoughts swirling in the darkness. The stillness of the night was a stark contrast to the turmoil within me. My marriage with Azriel, once a source of joy and companionship, now felt like a distant memory tainted with resentment and hurt. As I lay there, the narrative of our relationship replayed in my mind. Our first encounter at the office, the shared lunches, the late-night talks about our future. It all seemed so surreal now. The transition from colleagues to life partners had been seamless, almost like a story out of a fairy tale. But unlike those tales, our story lacked a happy ending. I remembered the early days of our marriage, filled with laughter and shared dreams. However, as time passed, Azriel's true nature began to surface. His indifference to starting a family, something I had always yearned for, became more apparent. His dismissive attitude towards my aspirations and needs grew more pronounced. The realization that I was in a marriage that lacked mutual respect and understanding was heartbreaking. The disparity in our financial contributions to the marriage only added to the strain. I had always been the higher earner, which I never minded until it became evident that Azriel took my hard work for granted. My salary covered our rent, bills, and living expenses. Azriel's earnings, however, seemed to vanish into thin air, spent on frivolous things and never contributing to our joint future. The more I thought about it, the more I recognized the imbalance in our relationship. It wasn't just about money. It was about effort, understanding, and support, all of which seemed to flow in one direction, from me to him. I had been so busy making ends meet and planning for a future that now seemed like a mirage. I had neglected my own needs and happiness. Lying there in the stillness of my childhood room, I felt a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, but also a sense of liberation. I realized that my decision to leave Azriel wasn't just about escaping an unhappy marriage. It was about reclaiming my life and dignity. It was about respecting myself enough to walk away from a relationship that no longer served me. As dawn broke, bringing light into the room, it felt symbolic of the new chapter I was about to embark on. It was going to be a journey of rediscovery and healing. I was ready to face the challenges ahead, armed with the knowledge of my worth and the strength of my resolve. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I was not the same person who had walked into that marriage. I was stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to build the life I deserved. The next few days were a blur of emotions and necessary formalities. Sitting in my childhood room, I often found myself staring out the window, lost in thought. It was during one of these moments that I decided to confront an issue I had long avoided, my relationship with Azriel's mother. Mrs. Gorman had always been a challenging presence in our lives. From the outset, she made no secret of her disapproval of me. Her visits to our home were frequent and unwelcome, filled with thinly veiled criticisms and sarcastic remarks about my career and lifestyle choices. I remember one evening coming home exhausted after a long day at work. As soon as I opened the door, Mrs. Gorman's voice greeted me, dripping with disapproval. "You're late again, aren't you?" she said, not even bothering to look up from her knitting. Poor Azriel, having to fend for himself. Her words stung, but what hurt more was Azriel's passive acceptance of her behavior. He never stood up for me, never tried to stop her constant jibes. His silence felt like a betrayal, a tacit approval of her treatment towards me. As I thought about how to address this issue, I realized that part of moving forward was dealing with the unresolved tensions and setting boundaries. I decided to meet Mrs. Gorman, not out of obligation, but to make it clear that her behavior was unacceptable and that her involvement in my life was over. The meeting was tense. Mrs. Gorman's small living room felt suffocating, filled with old photographs and memories of a past that no longer held any warmth for me. I sat across from her, maintaining a calm exterior despite the storm of emotions inside. "Mrs. Gorman," I began, "I wanted to talk to you about the way things have been between us. Your comments and behavior have been hurtful, and I can no longer allow that in my life." She looked up, surprise evident in her eyes. Perhaps she had never expected me to confront her. "My dear, I have only ever wanted what's best for Azriel," she replied, her voice laced with a defensiveness that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I understand you care for your son, but your actions have been disrespectful to me. As I move forward with my life, I want to make it clear that our interactions will be limited." Her response was a mix of disbelief and anger. "You're tearing this family apart. You're being selfish." I shook my head. I want to respect myself and my well-being. That's not selfishness, that's self-care, I finished. The conversation was brief and uncomfortable but necessary. As I left her house, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was one of the first steps towards reclaiming my independence and establishing my boundaries. The road to healing was long, but I knew that dealing with these difficult conversations was a crucial part of the journey. In the following weeks, as I adjusted to my new reality, I stumbled upon a truth that left me reeling. It was an ordinary evening, and I was sifting through our joint bank statements, a routine I had maintained even after leaving Azriel. That's when I noticed it. Regular withdrawals that I couldn't account for, all leading to one shocking revelation. Azriel had been secretly funneling money to his mother. The discovery felt like a punch to the gut. Every month a significant portion of our savings was being drained, and all this while I had been oblivious. Anger and betrayal bubbled up inside me. It wasn't just about the money, it was the deceit and the blatant disregard for our mutual goals and trust. I needed answers, and I needed them from Azriel. Confronting him was inevitable. I arranged to meet him at a neutral location, a quiet cafe we used to frequent during happier times. The meeting was tense from the start. Azriel seemed uneasy, his eyes avoiding mine as he fidgeted with his coffee cup. "Azriel, why have you been giving our savings to your mother without telling me?" I asked, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. He hesitated before responding. "She needed it, Skylar. You know her situation." "But why hide it? Why not discuss it with me?" I pressed on, seeking clarity in a situation that made no sense. "It was easier this way. I didn't want to burden you with it," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "Easier for whom, Azriel? Certainly not for me." The frustration in my voice was palpable. "We had plans, dreams, and you chose to ignore all that for what? To appease your mother?" Azriel didn't have an answer. His silence spoke volumes, confirming my worst fears that our marriage had been built on unequal grounds, with me investing more financially and emotionally. This realization was a turning point. It underscored the fact that my decision to leave was not just right but necessary. I had been contributing to a partnership where my efforts were neither valued nor reciprocated. As I left the cafe, a sense of clarity settled over me. The path I had chosen, daunting as it was, led away from deceit and towards a future where my dreams and efforts were respected. I was on my own now, but for the first time in a long while I felt in control of my destiny. The road ahead was mine to shape, and I was determined to make the most of it. The weeks following my discovery of Azriel's financial betrayal were a whirlwind of emotion and action. I began the process of untangling my life from his, a journey fraught with challenges but necessary for my peace of mind. Amidst this turmoil, an incident occurred that solidified my resolve to end our marriage once and for all. It was an ordinary Tuesday evening, and I had agreed to meet Azriel to discuss the division of our assets. I arrived at our meeting place, a local park we used to stroll through, bracing myself for a difficult conversation. But nothing could have prepared me for what was to come. As we sat on a secluded bench, the discussion quickly escalated. Voices were raised and tensions mounted as we delved into the painful details of our failing marriage. That's when it happened. In a fit of anger, Azriel lashed out, his hand striking my face with a force that left me stunned. The physical pain was sharp, but the emotional wound cut deeper. I looked into Azriel's eyes, searching for a trace of the man I had once loved, but all I saw was a stranger consumed by anger and frustration. This was not the first time he had resorted to physical aggression, but it was the moment I knew with unwavering certainty that there was no going back. I stood up, my hand instinctively touching my reddened cheek, and faced him. "It's over, Azriel. I can't take it anymore. I won't," I said, my voice trembling but resolute. Azriel seemed to realize the gravity of his actions, his anger dissolving into a mix of remorse and disbelief. But it was too late. The trust and love that once formed the foundation of our relationship had been irrevocably broken. In the days that followed, I initiated the divorce proceedings. It was a daunting process filled with legalities and negotiations, but I was determined to see it through. I knew that this was not just about ending a marriage, it was about reclaiming my life and dignity. As I moved through the motions, signing papers and meeting with lawyers, I felt a growing sense of empowerment. Each step, no matter how small, was a step away from the pain and towards a future of my own making. The journey was not easy. There were moments of doubt and loneliness, times when the weight of my decision felt overwhelming. But through it all, I held on to the belief that I deserved better, a life free from fear, disrespect, and betrayal. As I stood outside the courthouse, the final divorce papers in hand, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. The chapter of my life that included Azriel was officially closed, but a new chapter was waiting to be written. A chapter where I was the author of my own story, free to pursue happiness and fulfillment on my own terms. The finalization of my divorce felt like a deep exhale after holding my breath for too long. The sense of freedom was exhilarating, yet it came with a tinge of apprehension about what lay ahead. For the first time in many years, I was truly on my own, both a daunting and liberating prospect. In the aftermath of the divorce, I immersed myself in work and in rebuilding my life. It was during this period of transition that I discovered an empowering truth: my financial independence. The investments I had made, the savings I had accumulated, they were my lifeline, a testament to my foresight and discipline. It dawned on me that despite the emotional turmoil of the past years, I had managed to secure a stable financial foundation for myself. With this realization, I began to dream again. The dream of owning a home, once shared and then shattered, resurfaced with a new sense of purpose. This time, it was solely mine, untethered from the compromises and disappointments of my marriage. I started house hunting, each viewing a step towards reclaiming my independence. Eventually, I found it, a quaint house nestled in a quiet neighborhood not too far from work. It was perfect, not just a structure of bricks and mortar, but a symbol of my resilience and autonomy. Purchasing the house was an exhilarating experience. As I signed the papers, a sense of accomplishment washed over me. This was more than a financial transaction. It was a milestone marking the beginning of a new chapter in my life. Moving in was a surreal experience. Each box I unpacked, each picture I hung, felt like a small victory. The house, with its cozy living room and sunlit kitchen, quickly transformed from a space into a home, my sanctuary. In this new home, I found peace and a sense of self that had been lost in the chaos of my marriage. The loneliness that occasionally crept in was far outweighed by the freedom and pride I felt in my newfound independence. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, I began to establish a new routine, embracing the joys and challenges of living on my own. I reconnected with old friends, picked up hobbies I had long abandoned, and even started exploring new interests. Life was no longer about surviving, it was about thriving. The journey to this point had not been easy. It was marked by pain, betrayal, and heartbreak. But as I sat in my garden one evening, watching the sunset paint hues of orange and pink, I realized that every step, every struggle, had been worth it. I had emerged stronger, more self-assured, and with a profound understanding of my own worth. This was my new beginning, a chance to live life on my own terms unapologetically and authentically. The road ahead was mine to explore, filled with endless possibilities and opportunities for growth and happiness, and I was ready to embrace it all. Life in my new home brought a sense of tranquility I hadn't felt in years. I was rediscovering myself, enjoying the simple pleasures of solitude, and the freedom to make choices unencumbered by another's expectations. However, this peace was soon disrupted by an unexpected challenge, the reemergence of Azriel and his mother in my life. It started with an unexpected visit from Azriel a few months after the divorce was finalized. I opened the door one evening to find him standing there, looking as if he was grappling with a mix of emotions. The sight of him brought back a flood of memories, not all pleasant. "Skylar, we need to talk," Azriel said, his voice tinged with a desperation I hadn't heard before. I hesitated but eventually let him in, curious about what he had to say. The conversation that followed was both bizarre and revealing. Azriel was struggling to adjust to life without me. His mother, Mrs. Gorman, was exerting more pressure on him, especially financially, and he was finding it difficult to cope. "I made a mistake, Skylar. I see that now. Can we try again?" he asked, almost pleading. His words took me aback. The thought of going back to the life I had with Azriel was unimaginable. "Azriel, that part of our lives is over. We've moved on, or at least I have. I wish you well, but there's no going back," I replied, my voice firm. Asriel left that day, but it wasn't the end. Mrs. Gorman started making appearances too. She would show up unannounced, hurling accusations and blame for the demise of her son's happiness. Her visits became so frequent and disruptive that I had to make it clear she was not welcome. "You need to leave, Mrs. Gorman. What happened between Asriel and me is between us. You have no right to come here and harass me," I told her during one such encounter. Their attempts to re-enter my life were exhausting and distracting. Asriel's refusal to accept the divorce and move on, coupled with his mother's intrusive behavior, was taking a toll on my newfound peace. I realized I needed to set firm boundaries. I sought legal advice and sent them both a clear message. Any further harassment would have legal consequences. It was a hard step to take, especially against someone I once cared for, but it was necessary for my well-being. Gradually, their visits and calls became less frequent and eventually stopped. I had stood my ground, and it had paid off. The peace in my life was restored, and with it, my focus shifted back to building a future that was mine and mine alone. This experience, though challenging, reinforced a valuable lesson: the importance of setting and maintaining boundaries. It was a testament to my growth and strength, a reminder that I was no longer the person who could be easily swayed or burdened by others' expectations. In the tranquility of my home, I found not just a physical space, but a mental and emotional sanctuary. It was my haven, a place where I could be truly myself, free from the shadows of a past that no longer had a hold on me. The journey had been tumultuous, but it had led me to a place of self-respect and empowerment, and for that, I was profoundly grateful. The cessation of Asriel and his mother's intrusions marked a turning point in my journey. I had defended my space, my peace, and in doing so, reaffirmed my commitment to a life defined on my own terms. This newfound liberation was not just about living without interference. It was about actively shaping a life that reflected my values and aspirations. One of the most significant steps in this process of rebuilding was reconnecting with my parents. They had been my unwavering support through the darkest days, and now, in this phase of renewal, they continued to be my pillars of strength. I invited them over to my new home, wanting to share this symbol of my independence with them. The joy and pride in their eyes when they first walked through the door were indescribable. Our bond, which had always been strong, had deepened further as they saw the life I was building. As weeks turned into months, my home became a hub of warmth and activity. I hosted dinners for friends, rediscovering the joy of socializing and laughter. My garden, once just an extension of the property, became a labor of love, a place where I planted flowers and vegetables, relishing the dirt under my nails and the sun on my back. Professionally, I found new vigor. I took on challenging projects, bringing a creativity and dedication that didn't go unnoticed. My career, which had once taken a back seat to my marital woes, was now thriving. The satisfaction of achieving milestones at work was complemented by the financial stability and freedom it afforded me. In my personal life, I began exploring new interests. I joined a local book club, finding solace and excitement in the pages of novels and the discussions that followed. I took up yoga, which not only strengthened my body, but brought a sense of calm and mindfulness to my days. But perhaps the most significant change was internal. The ordeal with Asriel and the subsequent journey had transformed me. I had developed a resilience and a clarity about what I wanted from life and what I was no longer willing to accept. I learned to cherish my own company and found contentment in moments of solitude. The transformation wasn't just about becoming stronger. It was about becoming more empathetic, more in tune with my emotions, and more understanding of the complexities of relationships. I learned to forgive, not for the sake of those who had wronged me, but for my peace. Forgiveness didn't mean erasing the past. It meant freeing myself from the bitterness that could hinder my future. As I look back on the journey from the breaking point in my marriage to the rebuilding of my life, I see a tapestry of experiences, each thread integral to the person I have become. The path was fraught with challenges, but each obstacle was a stepping stone to a better, more fulfilling life. Today I stand in my garden, the sun setting on the horizon, casting a warm glow over my little sanctuary. I am at peace, content with the knowledge that I have not just survived but thrived. My story, marked by pain and triumph, is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. As I look towards the future, I do so with hope and excitement. I know that life will have its ups and downs, but I also know that I have the strength to face whatever comes my way. My journey is a continuous one, each day an opportunity to learn, grow, and embrace the joy of living a life that is authentically, unapologetically mine. My name is Gianna. My husband, Hassan, is an architect, or perhaps more accurately, a designer. His work is complicated and I don't fully understand it, but he holds a first-class architect's license. His main job is to design plans for houses and buildings. We got married 6 years ago and have been blessed with 2 daughters, aged 4 and 2. We live as a family of 4 and lead a happy life. Originally, we lived in an apartment, but as our daughters grew older, we felt it would become cramped. So we decided to buy a used single-family house. Although it hasn't been around for many years, it still required some improvement. That's when my husband decided to work on it again. Not only my husband, but also my father-in-law, who is my husband's father, has a passion for DIY. Even though he doesn't hold any qualifications like an architect, he often makes tables and chairs at his parents' house and even made a bookshelf for our daughters. The quality of his work is exceptionally high, to the point where I think they could be sold. Therefore, my husband and father-in-law teamed up to make improvements to our new home. It's not exactly a renovation, but they have been repainting the interior and knocking down walls to create one spacious room from 2 small ones. Every weekend, they work on it together. It has been almost half a year since they started doing it themselves, which is cheaper and allows us to customize according to our preferences. They mainly focus on remodeling the living space, so our family has been living on the first floor most of the time. At first, I was skeptical about doing the renovation ourselves, but as I witnessed my husband and father-in-law's skill, I was amazed to see how our house was becoming more beautiful. Seeing that, both my daughters and I grew more and more excited with each passing day. However, there has been one troublesome thing in the past 6 months. The culprit is none other than my husband Hassan's mother, or in other words, my mother-in-law. Ever since my father-in-law started helping with the remodeling of our house, my mother-in-law's harassment toward me has been getting worse and worse. "It's irresponsible of you to make my husband help with the housework," she would say. "And to think you don't even work and leave everything to Hassan and your father-in-law. What on earth is going on?" She would always call me and make sarcastic remarks while my father-in-law was working on the house. Well, I suppose it's what they call jealousy. She probably doesn't like the fact that we are having a great time over here without her. At first, I even tried inviting her over for coffee. "Would you like to come over and have a cup of coffee with us, mother-in-law?" I asked, but she firmly refused, saying, "Who would drink coffee with a lazy daughter-in-law like you?" I don't consider myself lazy at all. The reason I'm not working now is that I have 2 young daughters. Hassan and I decided that I would start working once our eldest daughter starts elementary school. No matter how many times I try to explain, my mother-in-law refuses to listen. On the contrary, she accuses me of making Hassan do all the work. "It's crazy to make him do household chores even on his days off. Are you out of your mind?" she would say. I got tired of arguing back, so I just let her words flow past me. To be honest, I don't think my mother-in-law liked me from the beginning. Even when I first visited Hassan's house for our marriage introduction, she was all smiles as long as Hassan was present. However, as soon as Hassan left the room, she took the opportunity to shower me with sarcastic remarks. "Hassan chose such a remarkable girl. Are you kidding me? If it were me, I could find a much more suitable girl for Hassan," she said with disdain. At that moment, I wondered if it would be better not to proceed with the marriage, but I loved Hassan dearly and wanted to be happy with him, so I didn't consider breaking up as an option. Of course, I couldn't tell Hassan about what his mother said. I had some anxiety because since the idea of living together was never mentioned from the beginning, I thought I could just avoid getting deeply involved. So I decided to marry him. However, even after getting married, my mother-in-law's attitude remained unchanged. Not a single word was spoken to me during the wedding ceremony. No, it wasn't just during the wedding ceremony. Even when I visited my in-laws for family events, she completely ignored me when Hassan wasn't around. Moreover, she started showing a cold attitude toward my daughters as well. That's why I was grateful for the 6 months when my father-in-law came to help. I didn't have to go to my in-laws' place. Even before the remodeling started, my mother-in-law's treatment was terrible. Back when we were still living in an apartment and I was struggling with childcare, especially with our younger child, she knew about the situation. My mother-in-law suddenly visited our house even though my husband was at work. She entered without permission and sat at the table without asking. "Gianna, your husband's mother is here. Make me a coffee," she demanded. Even when I was feeding or putting my daughter to sleep, she didn't care. If things weren't revolving around her, she wouldn't be satisfied. Reluctantly, I put my daughter in her crib and went to make coffee. But then my daughter started crying. And what did my mother-in-law do? She didn't comfort the baby, nor did she make the tea herself. She is so annoyed. She must have no discipline. Even though you're at home every day taking care of the child, you are not capable of anything, she said, pointing her finger at the bookshelf. "It's dusty. Clean it properly." When she saw the laundry that was left out, she commented, "It will get wrinkled. It looks sloppy." She kept pointing out things that bothered her every chance she got. And finally, "Hassan deserves better than a wife like this," she said and left, without drinking a sip of the coffee I made. That time, I couldn't hold in my anger and frustration anymore. I raised my voice, crying in anger. I contemplated discussing it with my husband many times, but he was busy with work and came home late, so I wanted to put him to bed as soon as possible. The desire to do so took precedence, and I couldn't bring myself to talk about it. Those were relatively good times. We didn't meet frequently, and there were times I pretended not to be home. My mother-in-law kept calling me until I answered the phone. Gradually, things changed. About half a year ago, she switched from a free phone to a smartphone. Recently, if I ignore her calls, she accuses me of intentionally ignoring her. She often brings my mother into the conversation, saying things like, "You're ignoring me, aren't you? It's not just about you. It involves your mother, too." She persistently sends messages that practically demand I answer the phone, so reluctantly I pick up on weekends, thinking I just have to endure. "Hello," I say, letting the words flow past me. No matter how I respond, it never satisfies her. "What's with the attitude? Are you even reflecting on what I said? I wouldn't mind if you got a divorce, you know," she snaps. Lately, it seems she's bothered by the fact that I'm not working and just taking care of the children. "You're just making a lot of work while you indulge yourself. That's why you're getting so fat," she sneers. It's true that when I was pregnant with my second daughter, I had severe morning sickness at first. When I entered the stable period, I started eating a lot and gained quite a bit of weight, but I managed to keep my weight within the recommended ranges. Gradually, my body shape has been returning since giving birth. However, for my mother-in-law, it seems that berating me is the only way she can relieve her stress. Every time we meet, she ridicules me, saying things like, "You're like a pig. You're like a walrus." She sneers and mocks me, and recently she started saying those things even during phone calls. Nearby residents seem to be spreading rumors that I'm not useful as a daughter-in-law. When I go to my in-laws' house and meet the neighbors, they look at me strangely and whisper things like, "You have to take good care of your mother-in-law, you know." It's gotten to the point where they say such things to me. I certainly want to get along with my mother-in-law if possible, but it's actually her who won't allow that. However, I couldn't say that to the neighbors who know nothing about the situation, so all I could do was smile and brush it off. One particular weekend, my father-in-law came to our house, and my husband and I worked on some renovations together. This morning, my father-in-law handed me pasta that my mother-in-law had made. "It's something Hassan has always liked, so she occasionally brings it over," he explained. Thinking it was time for a break, I started preparing coffee for my husband and father-in-law, and as usual, the phone rang. "Hello, hello," I said in my usual low voice. "You answered the phone quickly, huh? Just waiting around by yourself again, I bet." My mother-in-law's loud voice pierced my ear, and instinctively I moved the smartphone away from my right ear. I was just about to serve coffee to my father-in-law and husband as I tried to explain. "You're just coming up with some excuse because I called you. You always manage to make yourself look innocent," she accused, somehow trying to portray me as the villain. Knowing that saying something bad would only escalate things further, I put my phone down and switched it to speaker mode, starting to prepare the coffee without saying anything. My mother-in-law sighed and started the conversation again. "Anyway, did you receive the pasta from your father-in-law? Did you make sure Hassan ate it?" she demanded. "I received it from my father-in-law, but Hassan hasn't eaten yet," I replied. "Why not? You didn't eat it all by yourself, did you?" she accused. As if I would do something like that, I thought, but I simply replied, "He hasn't eaten it yet." "Well, why hasn't Hassan eaten it? Did you prevent him from eating it?" she continued. "He said he'll eat it later, so I put it in the refrigerator. I haven't stopped him from eating it, so please don't worry so much," I explained. My mother-in-law let out another big sigh. "You truly are a genius at irritating people," she remarked. I couldn't understand the sudden remark. When did I irritate her? If anything, isn't it her who is always getting irritated for no reason? "From the beginning I never liked you. You claim to be dating Hassan, but why are your thoughts so unlikable, woman?" she said. "And what about the children? You gave birth to 2 kids and neither of them is a boy. You should have at least given birth to a successor, you worthless woman," she continued. In that moment, something inside me snapped. "Please stop it. Leave me aside, but don't speak ill of my daughters," I said, my voice trembling. I had never spoken to my mother-in-law in such a manner before, but I couldn't bear it anymore. Hearing such things about my precious daughters, who are the children of the man I love, drove me to my limit. "What's with that attitude? Besides, it's your fault for not giving birth to a boy," she continued her tirade. Seizing the opportunity, I fired back. "What's wrong with having girls? My 2 daughters are treasures to me and my husband. They should be precious grandchildren to you as well. How can you say such a thing?" I got angry. Overwhelmed by the forcefulness I rarely displayed, my mother-in-law fell silent. However, my emotions couldn't be contained, and the words continued to overflow. "Even before we moved here, you would suddenly show up at our house, complaining and then leaving. You also spoke ill of me to the neighbors, didn't you? Do you even understand how much I struggled?" The patience I had held on to for so long suddenly overflowed, and tears streamed down my face. Hassan's mother, perhaps noticing my tears, seized the opportunity to strike. "Why are you crying? It's embarrassing. I've only been trying to raise you as a daughter-in-law. If you can't bear even this, then divorce Hassan. As long as it's not a pig like you, it can be a cow or a horse," she said. At that moment, I realized that despite everything I had said, my true feelings had failed to convey. And suddenly, tears began to flow uncontrollably. Upon witnessing this, my mother-in-law remarked, "Do you think everything will be fine if you cry like that? Oh, I can't stand it." Suddenly, Hassan's father spoke up. "What was that just now?" I turned toward the direction of the voice and saw my father-in-law and husband standing there. With a stern expression, my father-in-law asked, "Was that my wife just now? Are you on the phone?" He directed the question to me. Perhaps hearing my father-in-law's voice through the phone, my mother-in-law immediately grew flustered. "Oh, it's you! How long have you been listening?" she stammered. "Since the beginning of the call, I heard everything together with Hassan," he replied. Saying that, my father-in-law reached for my smartphone, then facing my phone, which was on speaker mode, he exclaimed, "What a disgraceful thing you are doing! This is embarrassing! Come here right now and apologize to Gianna!" he shouted angrily. I heard a faint sigh from my mother-in-law, but my husband continued after my father-in-law without hesitation. "Mom, have you been doing this to Gianna? That's terrible. Honestly, I'm disappointed. We make decisions as a couple. You don't have the right to interfere. I'm really disillusioned." Hearing this from her favorite son, my mother-in-law must have been quite shocked. Over the phone, she suddenly began apologizing to me. "I'm sorry, Gianna. I won't say it anymore. Please forgive me," she pleaded. However, my father-in-law didn't accept such an apology. "I told you to apologize in person," he continued to insist. Then my eldest daughter came up from the back room. "Is Grandma coming?" "I don't want her to come," she spoke up, revealing not only to me but also to my husband and father-in-law. "Grandma is mean to both me and Lily. She said nasty things to Mom too. I don't want to see her." She said it clearly. At that moment my husband told her, "You're right. Who would want to see her? Don't worry, we won't let Grandma come anymore, and we won't let her be mean to Mom either. Saying that, he gently caressed our daughter's hair. Dad, promise me you'll protect Mom, okay? As our daughter hugged me while saying that, I truly felt deep affection for her. Finally, my mother-in-law said, I am truly sorry. I won't say anything anymore, so please forgive me. And then she hung up the phone. Since then, I no longer receive such calls from my mother-in-law, and my father-in-law said, if anything happens, let me know, he assured me. Perhaps my mother-in-law had been scolded enough by my father-in-law because she became quiet at home like a figurine. She stopped talking behind my back to the neighbors, and my mother-in-law retracted everything he had said before. Thanks to my father-in-law and husband, the remodeling of our house was successfully completed, and we finally had a spacious and functional home. With no more phone calls from my mother-in-law, I could use my time for myself, and started enjoying comfortable days. My name is Michelle, and I'm 32 years old. I've been married to my husband Cooper for 3 years now. But we don't have any children yet due to work circumstances. Lately, we've been talking about wanting to have a child soon. I have a cute younger brother named Jonathan, who is 2 years younger than me at 30 years old. This is the unbelievable story of what happened at Jonathan's wedding. My younger brother Jonathan has always been a quiet and reserved person. He used to follow me everywhere, but his lack of speech made it difficult for him to make many friends. However, in front of me, he was always an innocent and cute little brother, and I have always tried to be a supportive sister to him. Even as adults, Jonathan and I still meet up regularly. I got married at the age of 29, and Jonathan moved out to start his career. We often go out for meals and spend time together, but I never expected that he would have a partner, let alone be married. It turns out that Jonathan's wife is someone he met at work. Jonathan has always been intelligent and graduated from a prestigious university. He is now working for a large corporation, and his wife was a clerk there. When I saw her picture, I was surprised by her flashy appearance. I wondered if that was the type of woman my introverted brother liked. I asked my brother out of simple curiosity, "What do you see in her?" Jonathan said, I guess she's the opposite of me." At first I was like, huh? But then my brother continued, "I've always had trouble saying what's on my mind, so I admire how she can speak so frankly about anything." That can be both a good thing and a bad thing. While I was thinking that, I couldn't help but feel happy as I watched my brother talk a little shyly, which was a first. I had always thought that my quiet brother who had decided to get married must have found an amazing person. When I got home and told my husband about it, Cooper said with a grin, "Wow, Jonathan's really living it up, huh?" My husband is an actor, and he's pretty well known. If you watch TV or read magazines, you'd probably recognize him. I'm a model, not an actress, but we met through work. I mainly do magazine shoots and don't appear on TV, but we happened to meet at a magazine shoot. His talent agency was promoting him heavily, so he appeared in magazines as well as on TV. As a result, I've met him quite a few times during photo shoots, and have been able to talk to him properly when we went out to eat with mutual acquaintances. Things have been going smoothly since then, and we've been together for 3 years since we got married. Even now, our relationship is great, and he really is a handsome actor. I can't help but think that he always looks so put together. My husband was an only child, but he adored Jonathan like a real brother, and they would sometimes go out for drinks together. When Jonathan's wedding was announced, my husband was overjoyed. On the day of Jonathan's wedding a few months later, I wore the new party dress I bought for this occasion, and asked a makeup artist I know to do my hair and makeup. Meanwhile, my husband put on a sharp suit, and looked even cooler than usual. I couldn't help but wonder if this was really my husband. "You look especially beautiful today," he said, which made me happy too. I felt so lucky to be able to attend the wedding of my beloved little brother. Thinking that, we headed to the wedding venue. However, when we arrived and entered the hall, I noticed something odd. Huh? Why is my name missing from the family table? My parents' names and my husband's name were there, but not mine. My husband and I were both confused. What's going on? A mistake? Even when we told our parents, who we met at the venue, they seemed to know nothing about it. We were all at a loss as to what to do when the mother of my little brother's bride spoke up. "Oh, Michelle, it's you. I invited you today, didn't I?" she said with a smirk. What do you mean? My seat isn't prepared," I replied. "As you can see, we didn't prepare a seat for you," she said. My mind went blank. I'm the groom's sister, so why don't I have a seat? Why do I have to be told such a thing by the bride's mother? I had to say something, but the words didn't come out. My mother said, "What do you mean? Michelle is Jonathan's sister. It's strange that she doesn't have a seat, isn't it?" Then the bride's mother wrapped her arm around my husband's arm and said, "Of course, we invited Cooper too. We prepared a seat for him. Come on, sit down." She approached my husband in a cajoling voice, which was quite different from how she spoke to me. My husband shrugged off the bride's mother and supported me by the shoulder. "This is not a joke," he said. Seeing this, she seemed satisfied and pushed me again. "Anyway, Michelle doesn't have a seat, so could you leave?" she said with a triumphant look. And I was too dumbfounded to respond. "I see. Okay, let's go home," I said, and my husband took my hand and left the venue. My parents followed us from behind and said, "We'll go home together too." But I replied, "That's not necessary. Jonathan would feel sorry for you. Please attend the wedding reception. Sorry, but Cooper and I will leave." As we were having that conversation, the bride's mother chased after us. "Wait a minute, Cooper." Breathless, she came running to us and said without any apology, "Michelle, it's okay for you to go home, but Cooper should attend. With you there, the venue will be lively and I can show you off. Oh, by the way, take a photo with us, won't you?" As if it were natural. Cooper finally snapped at his mother-in-law. "Don't mess around." Even though he usually appears on TV and has a mild-mannered personality, the room froze at the sound of his angry voice. "You are making a fool of my precious wife. I wouldn't take a photo with someone as uncivilized as you." The mother of the bride stood there with her mouth agape in shock, as did my parents. "Let's go, Michelle," he said. Then my husband took my hand and we left the venue. According to what my parents told me, the mother of the bride was unhappy throughout the ceremony, but they were able to finish the wedding safely. Jonathan didn't know about it and returned to our parents' home after listening to a series of stories from them. Upon hearing this, my husband and I headed to our parents' home as well. As soon as we arrived, my brother rushed over to me and bowed his head. "I'm sorry, sis. Looks like I made you feel bad today," he said. "What are you talking about? It's not your fault, Jonathan." I said that, and my brother lifted his face and looked awkward. "Hey, Jonathan, I don't understand why your mother-in-law hates me so much. We only greeted each other once during the meeting of both families, right?" I asked. Then my brother spoke with a heavy voice. "It seems like my mother-in-law is jealous of you, sis," he uttered. "Jealous?" Unexpectedly, my voice went up. I don't know the details either because I never asked her, but my mother-in-law also wanted to become a model in the past, but she never passed any auditions apparently, so she tried to make her daughter a model instead, but that didn't work out either. It may be rude to say this, but my younger brother's wife and her mother can't be described as having good figures, to say the least. In fact, they have figures that suggest they should be more mindful of their bodies. However, when my brother said something like that, I was taken aback. For such a reason, they're harassing me? While I was puzzling over it, my husband asked my brother, "I understand why that person dislikes Michelle, but why didn't you notice that this has been going on until today, Jonathan? You didn't know either, did you?" Jonathan looked uncomfortable and said, "I left everything about the wedding to my girlfriend." My brother hung his head while saying that. As we listened to the details, we found out a lot of things. My brother was busy with work and wanted to have the wedding a little later. However, his girlfriend and her mother had already made the wedding plans without consulting him. His girlfriend had quit her job as soon as the wedding plans were made and insisted on making all the decisions herself. They said that the bride is the main character of a wedding, so let us do as we please. As he spoke, Jonathan's voice began to tremble. "I'm sorry, sis. I never thought things would turn out like this," he said, tears falling from his eyes. It wasn't his fault. Looking back, everything had been strange from the beginning. As we were relatives, we didn't receive an invitation, but for some reason, my husband received detailed information about the wedding from the bride. In hindsight, I was a fool for not noticing how unnatural it was. "Jonathan, it's okay. Don't blame yourself too much," I said, patting my brother's shoulder. He continued to cry, apologizing repeatedly. After he calmed down, he said he wanted to be alone for a while and away from his wife. To be honest, I didn't want anything to do with such an unreasonable family anymore, but I thought it was his own life and his own decision, so I decided to watch over him without saying anything. After a while, my younger brother contacted me. "Mom-in-law wants to talk to you, so please come to our house." To be honest, I didn't understand what was going on. After doing such a thing, shouldn't they apologize directly first? My husband was also angry next to me, but I decided that I couldn't be satisfied with this situation and went to their house. That day, my brother, my husband who came along to support me, and I headed to their house as a group of 3. When we rang the doorbell, the mother-in-law on the other side noticed my husband and said in a cloying voice, "I'll open the door now." Upon seeing my face, she made a blatantly unpleasant expression, but I went inside without paying any attention to it. In the living room, my brother's wife was also present, but I got straight to the point without worrying about it. "You said there's something you want to talk about. What is it?" I asked. The mother-in-law replied, "Can you at least apologize first?" "Huh? Why should I apologize?" I replied a bit firmly. "It's because of you that Cooper couldn't participate in the wedding ceremony, you know. Everyone around me was looking forward to seeing Cooper. It's all your fault. Can't you apologize?" The mother-in-law insisted. "What are you talking about? With all due respect, this situation is your fault, isn't it? It's extremely thoughtless of you to not have prepared a seat for the groom's older sister at the wedding," I retorted. "Are you getting a little too big for your britches just because you've been in a magazine?" My younger brother's mother-in-law followed suit. My brother's wife followed suit. "Yeah, just because you have a nice figure, your face isn't ugly, but there are plenty of models like you out there," she sneered. Then the two of them burst out laughing while Jonathan's mother joined in. I was speechless, and Jonathan shouted, "Don't be ridiculous. Do you think my sister got to where she is in life without making any effort? She worked hard and turned her weaknesses into strengths." "Yes, my height has always been a source of insecurity, a trait I inherited from my father. When I was in school, boys teased me by calling me a giant girl. I made sure to never wear heels, always hunching over to appear smaller. But then my younger brother Jonathan said to me, 'Sis, you're blessed with height, so use it to your advantage.' His words encouraged me to start wearing heels, standing tall and confident. Suddenly, the world seemed brighter. Before long, I was scouted to be a model when my family and I were out and about. In fact, if it weren't for my brother, I never would have met my wonderful husband." Thinking back on this, my husband chimed in, picking up where my brother left off. "Michelle works hard every day, stretching, running, and maintaining her figure. Meanwhile, the two of you don't even bother looking in the mirror before criticizing her." Upon hearing my husband's words, the other couple turned beet red and bowed their heads. "It's precisely because people like you can't help but feel jealous that your nasty personalities manifest themselves in your appearance. Try to change your attitude," he continued. As a popular, handsome actor, Jonathan confronted the other couple with reality, leaving them speechless. "I never thought you were like this. I was going to forgive you if you apologized to my sister right now, but I've had enough. I want a divorce," Jonathan declared. No, please, not a divorce. I can't bear it," Jonathan's wife cried out in despair, tears streaming down her face. However, it seemed like my younger brother had recorded our conversation today, just in case. "If you don't agree to the divorce, I will hire a lawyer to make it happen." Furthermore, it seemed that other guests at the wedding venue had recorded their behavior and remarks as well, which my brother claimed would be used as evidence. Upon hearing this, she turned pale and signed the divorce papers on the spot. However, her mother was not satisfied with that decision and kept yelling at me saying, "It's all your fault." Ignoring her mother's comments, we stood up and headed towards the entrance. Although her mother followed us and tried to persuade my brother, it was already too late. His mind was made up and nothing could change it. My brother may now have a divorce under his belt, but at least he was able to sever ties with that minefield of a family. I truly believe that it's for the best that he never became a member of such an irrational family. Michelle, as Jonathan's sister, you need to check out his future partner, Super said with a laugh, addressing both me and my brother. Yeah, that's right. Next time I'll have my sister and brother-in-law check her out. But I think I'll take a break from marriage for a while, my brother said with a troubled smile. When we told our parents that he had gotten a divorce and was back home, they were overjoyed. There's a better person out there for Jonathan, so the whole family comforted my brother, and we had a big party that night. Meanwhile, Jonathan's ex-wife had quit her job on a whim and couldn't go back, so she was still unemployed. She yelled at our parents, blaming them for spoiling Jonathan. I still meet up with my brother regularly and have enjoyable family meals at home. I hope he finds happiness when he meets the right person next time. I'm pregnant with your husband's child, my sister suddenly confessed. I was speechless. That's why, please divorce me right away, he said. I will marry your sister. I'm sorry I stole a husband who earns $6,000 per month as a doctor, my sister said, with my husband looking down on me with a serious expression, holding her hand tightly. I was so shocked that I couldn't say anything. What's with that face? You are still as ugly as ever. That's why your husband changed his mind. From now on, you will have to live on your low salary, my sister added smugly. She left, and I felt my heart turn cold. I wanted to say I'm sorry, but not to them. They wouldn't even know that I was secretly laughing inside, knowing my sister's misunderstanding. My name is Ruby. It's been 3 years since I married my husband Bjorn. We met at the university's tennis club. Tennis was the only way for me to relieve stress from my suffocating university life, which was all about studying. The club was a bright and sharper activity, so I often spent time on the school tennis court, cutting into my study time. You have a beautiful form, he said. It was my husband who approached me first, Bjorn, who was in a different department. Unlike me, he didn't seem too busy studying, and whenever I came to the club, he was always the first to approach me. I used to play tennis hard until high school. I quit because of an injury, but I can teach you. I think we are very comfortable, he said, using the usual pickup lines. I believed it all, hook, line, and sinker. Until then, I had never dated a guy and had hardly had a decent conversation because I was so focused on studying. I was captivated by Bjorn's aggressive attitude. 5 years later, I realized how difficult it would be. After graduating from college, Bjorn and I got married. It would be a lie to say that we never thought or talked about breaking up during our time in school. In reality, I ended up forgiving my unreliable husband's actions every time, and our relationship dragged on until graduation. I'll definitely be a good husband, he said during his proposal. I believed him. Looking back now, I'm not so sure. However, at the time, I still trusted him and had an emotional investment from our 5-year-long relationship. He's not a bad person at heart. I accepted his proposal with a somewhat light-hearted feeling. After we both entered the workforce, we became a dual-income household. I had a strong desire to work, and my husband didn't object to me working. Rather, he actively encouraged me. With the combined earnings of the two of us, we had a financial plan for our household. It was probably a blessing that we had this economic leeway while we were young. We couldn't have children yet because of our jobs. It was still early in our careers, so we focused on getting our own lives together first. We were climbing the career ladder smoothly and enjoying fulfilling days. But oh my, what's this? My gaze unintentionally drifted to the smartphone my husband had left in the living room. There was a message from an unfamiliar name. I usually try not to pry into people's private lives, but my husband has a history of cheating. It happened during our college days. At that time, my husband had secretly been exchanging messages with a girl from another club behind my back. I entered my husband's birthday and easily unlocked his smartphone. I opened the messaging app and was horrified to see that my worry had come true. There were records of flirtatious messages with a certain woman. I immediately confronted my husband. He reacted as if he were a monkey in a zoo that had lost its mind. It was a mistake, Ruby, he said. In other words, you admit to cheating? You had a relationship with this woman? Let's make love at the usual hotel. It's amazing how you can send such messages at your age. She's a new high school graduate? I asked. To sum up my husband's story, he had slept with a new female employee. He was her supervisor. It was a common story, but what was he educating her on exactly? I'm really sorry. I mean it, Ruby. I won't make this kind of mistake again, he pleaded. I ended up forgiving my husband's sincere apology. It was a repeat of what had happened during our university days. I couldn't help but sigh at my husband's careless attitude. Unlike when we were students, we had too many obligations and ties. If we got a divorce, we would have to report it to both of our families, apologize to our friends, and explain the situation at work. Honestly, it would have been easier to finish my husband off harshly than to deal with all the hassle. Of course, I made him write a letter promising that he wouldn't make the same mistake again. That's how our married life has continued, with some ups and downs, but we've managed to endure it. One day, I received a certain call from my mother, who was crying uncontrollably. "Your father has passed away," she sobbed. He collapsed on his way home after drinking and was taken to the hospital, where he was diagnosed with a stroke. Unfortunately, he couldn't recover from it due to the late discovery and the fact that it was freezing cold the night before. He was 60 years old and close to retirement. As his daughter, I took charge of all the funeral arrangements. My mother was too overwhelmed to handle anything. With the help of our relatives, I managed to complete all the procedures despite the difficult situation. I believed that the inconvenience caused to my workplace was the biggest problem I had ever caused in my life. However, my colleagues and supervisors did not complain a bit. I would never forget the gratitude I felt at that moment for the rest of my life. The only problem was with my sister, Adriana. She was 2 years older than me and had left home right after high school. It had been almost 10 years since I last saw her. The reason she left home was that she had always been a troublemaker and caused problems for our parents. She had even had run-ins with the police several times. Adriana had been quite unrestrained in her relationships with men since junior high school, even dating multiple men. Some of these men were even married. As her older sister, our parents frequently scolded her, saying, "Live your life seriously. Don't bring your own life problems into ours." Although it was the most reasonable advice, it didn't seem to resonate with Adriana at all. Eventually, our parents found out that Adriana had taken money from our house to give to a man, which led to a big fight with our father in particular. "Get out!" he yelled. It was no surprise that our father declared he was disowning her. "I don't consider you my daughter anymore," he said. She retorted with her own words. "Who'd want to come back to this poor, gloomy house?" After that, she never visited us until our father's death. But we had to let her know about it. I used her phone number and informed her of our father's death on the same day through a short message. Even though my mother was angry and thought it was unnecessary, I couldn't neglect my own sister. However, she didn't contact me until just before the funeral. I thought it was okay if she didn't come, but finally, my sister appeared at the memorial service after the cremation. It had been about 10 years since I had seen her sister's face, which was now heavily made up, almost 30% more than usual. "Oh, you got married," my sister Adriana said, turning to face us after a brief greeting to father who had passed away. My sister seemed more interested in the fact that I had brought my husband along. Although he had managed to take time off from work to attend the funeral, my husband had been as nervous as a bottled cat before Adriana's arrival. He was not the kind of person who could efficiently handle a situation like this. I had murmured, "I wish this could be over soon," but I didn't miss a word. "Your husband is not bad looking for someone you married from work. Did you meet him in college?" Adriana asked. "We were in the same circle back then. We actually work in different places," I replied. "Oh, I see you managed to snag yourself a decent educated man. Not bad for someone who only focused on studying. And it looks like you're not struggling for money either," Adriana noted. "Well, with him being a doctor, his salary is decent. Plus, we both work anyway, sis. Make sure to greet Dad properly," I said. "Oh, doctor, how impressive," Adriana said, her eyes gleaming with envy. She might have even licked her lips. My husband, on the other hand, could only fidget nervously under her snake-like gaze. That was the end of their meeting that day. Adriana said she would contact me soon, but she never even sent a condolence gift. I had no intention of echoing her mother's complaint of Adriana being an ungrateful daughter. It was on a certain day, half a year after the funeral. Although the sadness of losing her father had not healed, I had almost forgotten about the day of the funeral and the reunion with her sister. Adriana, on the other hand, seemed to remember him well, and so did my husband. Hey, Ruby. On her way back from work, I saw her husband's familiar figure near the station. He was wearing the navy shoes that I had just cleaned yesterday. What made me gasp was the figure of the woman next to my husband. They were holding hands affectionately. It was my husband's bad habit again. A wave of anger swept over me. But it wasn't just his act that surprised me this time. My own sister Adriana stood next to my husband, showing off her miniskirt, holding her husband's hand. My own sister was having an affair with my husband. Without hesitation, I decided to follow them. If it really was a scene of adultery, I would never forgive my husband. I have had to worry about my husband's infidelity many times, but when the other woman was my own sister, it was no joke. Moreover, they met at our father's funeral. This time, I'll definitely catch them by the tail. I gritted my teeth, determined not to lose sight of them. As expected, they walked towards the hotel district. My husband was supposed to be at work. What was his excuse for leaving? They passed several hotels, keeping even closer together. Finally, they stopped in front of one hotel and started kissing. Disgusting. Of course, it wasn't the first time I had to witness my husband's infidelity. They entered the hotel, and I, holding back nausea, waited for a while before calling my husband's smartphone. He didn't answer right away, and there was a tense pause before he finally spoke. "What? I'm at work," he said. "I need to check something with you." "Who are you with right now?" I asked, my voice shaking. What do you mean?" "I'm with my coworkers and my boss. We have an important meeting," my husband replied. "I see. So your place of business is the Jewelry Rest Love Hotel. Fancy name, don't you think?" said I, barely containing my anger. "What makes you say that?" he stammered. "I also know that my sister is near you. Explain to me why you and my sister are waiting there together," I demanded. My husband's voice became increasingly hoarse and drawn out. Finally, he gave in and confirmed the room number to me, checking with Adriana, who was sitting next to him. I pulled myself together and walked into the hotel, explaining the situation to the receptionist and paying for another room. Since they had caused her such humiliation, I would no longer take my husband so lightly. When I opened the door to room 402, my husband was waiting for me with a blue face, wearing a robe and already taking off his shirt. Adriana was there too, also in a robe, and looking at me with a contemptuous expression. She didn't feel guilty, even as she lit a cigarette. On the contrary, she seemed to be enjoying the situation. Just like 6 months ago, her makeup was applied like paint. I turned to her with a stern expression, realizing that she was the one I would have to deal with first. "What are you up to, sister? You knew he was my husband and you made a move on him anyway," I demanded. "Well, I couldn't help it. I was jealous. It wasn't easy for me after being kicked out of our parents' house. The landlord I was spending money on even dumped me, and nothing good was happening to me." "Yeah, and you seem to have a happy family life," Adriana said nonchalantly. "Leaving home was just your selfishness, wasn't it? You wanted to bother our parents to the very end, and even messed up my property. Everything was ruined from the beginning, wasn't it?" I asked. "I heard from Bjorn. It's a shame that you don't even have quiet time at home, because all you do is say rude things. That's why I'm here to comfort him." Adriana smirked. "Don't say whatever you want. This is our family's problem," I said firmly. "In short, you couldn't satisfy your husband, could you? You were plain and boring, unlike me. I'm the one who can satisfy him. That's why we've been living together for 6 months," Adriana declared. "Liar," shouted I. "We've been together since the funeral. Please understand, Ruby. It's not my fault either. All you've done is nag me, and for almost a year we haven't acted like a married couple. We haven't even had intimacy," my husband added, his voice shaking. My husband finally looked at me with a determined face and turned to me after my sister's intervention. I felt so awkward that I almost wanted to cry, but I answered my husband. "We couldn't stay married because of your womanizing. Have you forgotten your promise? You said you would never betray me again," I said accusingly. "Well," my husband hesitated. "Of all people, you had to choose my sister. And even right after my father's funeral, no peace," I continued. "Hey, stop picking on Bjorn. He's not yours anymore, is he, Bjorn?" intervened Adriana, as if whispering something in my husband's ear. Now it was my turn to be caught off guard. "Please, Ruby, let's make a deal. We're having a baby soon," my husband said with conviction. "What? I asked in amazement. Exactly what you heard. I am pregnant with Bjorn's child. We have been making love every week since then. This baby is the fruit of our love, Adriana said as she gently stroked her belly. My jaw dropped. They were both conniving criminals from the start. My husband planned to cheat on me with my sister and intended to dissolve us marriage. That's why they hadn't used contraceptives. It was only to brag about the baby to me. Too bad you don't stand a chance. He's already mine, Adriana pronounced. Bjorn, you will break up with her and marry me right afterward. We'll be a happy threesome, with a child in our arms, she continued. You've been dumped, Ruby. Please accept my condolences. Your elegant life is over. Doctors can get a salary of $6,000 a month. It will be mine now, Adriana scoffed. After my sister left, I walked out of the hotel room. Honestly, I don't remember how I got home after that. I threw up 3 times in my own bedroom while I was coughing up stomach acid. Tears wouldn't stop dripping from my eyes. Even more painful than losing my husband was that they both trampled on my dignity and used a child to do it. I cried all night and met the morning with a dry face. From that day on, my husband never came home. It was certain that he was staying with my sister. He will probably pick up his bed and leave soon, and he might present me with the divorce papers, along with the wedding ring we cherished together 5 years ago. It was the worst day of my life. But I couldn't take a day off from work. There are people who rely on me. Above all, work is my mainstay now. I greeted my peace and held back nausea and tears as I made my way to the workplace. A week later, as usual, I was working at the office when my husband and sister appeared in front of me. I wasn't particularly surprised, but it seemed quite shocking to them. My sister Adriana was in disbelief as she held her stomach. Why are you here? This is the gynecology department and I'm in charge today, I said. The doctor who usually examines you is off for personal reasons, I continued. You are the doctor? My sister said, puzzled. Bjorn was supposed to be the doctor. Looks like you've gotten it wrong. I'm the doctor. I studied hard to get into medical school, I explained. At the funeral, Bjorn said he was a doctor. You got yourself a high-earning husband who's a doctor, she insisted. I just said that if one of us became a doctor, we would have a decent income. You misunderstood me, I clarified. Bjorn said he was a doctor, my sister repeated, her gaze piercing my husband, who had apparently come as an escort. He was just stuttering, looking like a fish flopping around on the beach. I was going to talk to you properly, but then you said you had a child. You lied about being a doctor to impress me and slept with my sister. How pathetic. You're a low-wage salaryman, are you? I confronted him. What do you mean? Romance? What about your monthly salary of $6,000? You've even been looking at sky-high apartments. You've requested your 5th car loan, and you've already maxed out your card loan limit on designer bags and shoes. Why waste money like that? Why is Ruby here at this hospital? Doesn't she work at another hospital? Adriana questioned. That's why I brought everyone here. When I was on leave for my father's funeral, the doctor here helped me multiple times. Now it's her turn, and I'm returning the favor. While you were enjoying your affair, I was working my hardest, Ruby admitted. This is it for us. I'm better. You can get a divorce or remarry as you please, but I expect you to pay me a proper compensation fee, I declared. Wait, Ruby, I was wrong. I promised to change my ways. Let's forget about the divorce for a while, my husband pleaded. What are you talking about? When you cheated with the girl from work before, you made a promise, didn't you? If you do it again, I will demand any amount of compensation I want, I reminded him. I presented my husband with the written agreement that I had taken with my smartphone camera, complete with his signature and thumbprint. My husband flinched and let out a silent scream. At least $30,000 now, considering it's right after my father's funeral. I think we can add some extra percentage. I will have a good lawyer on the case, so you two better tremble in anticipation together, I warned. Wait, does that include me too? Will you ask me for compensation too? My sister asked, worried. Of course. Stealing my husband from my own sister means that much. Don't worry. I will give you a reprieve until the child is born. That's my moral duty as a gynecologist. But on the condition that you pay up in 4 months after the child is born. You will also have to give up all of your sister's bags and shoes and the contribution to the funeral fund. You will have to kneel and apologize right in front of my father's grave, I stated firmly. I finished speaking and glared at my sister. Then I moved on to my regular checkup. Please lie down on the bed, I instructed, but my sister ran out of the examination room as she was free. I may have frightened the nurses with my rubber gloves. My remaining husband seemed to want to say something for a moment, but he withdrew under the cold stares of the nurses. It was truly refreshing to think that I would never have to see my husband's face again. Then half a year later, my sister apparently gave birth to a healthy baby at a different gynecology clinic. Whatever my sister has done, the child was not at fault. Knowing there was a healthy baby girl, I felt delighted inwardly. But it was different when it came to my sister herself. I didn't feel a shred of pity for her. As I had declared after the child was born, I sent my sister a letter demanding compensation for damages. The total was $32,000. Of course, $2,000 was for my father's funeral expenses. If I received the payment, I planned to give it to my mother. Talking about my ex-husband, it seems he's struggling to make ends meet with the alimony he had to pay me. The rumor of his affair at work had made it impossible for him to continue there. It seems that finding a new full-time job has been difficult for him. He is currently juggling multiple temporary jobs. I have no idea who spread the rumor about his infidelity at his old workplace, but it's better left unsaid. On top of that, there are rumors that he still can't keep his hands off other women. He's been getting in trouble with my sister for fooling around with women nearby. I'm just glad that we are no longer together, and I can focus on my work as an obstetrician. Today, I'm helping independent mothers with their expanding bellies, and it feels fulfilling to be able to do so.